A man found a stray cat injured and dying in a field. His actions shocked everyone. What drives a man of cold logic and immense power to throw everything away for a dying creature no bigger than his hand? You might think it's a sign of madness, a fall from grace, but the truth behind his shocking obsession is a story of hidden grief, a whispered promise, and a love that even death couldn't silence. Subscribe, like, and stay with us to uncover the astonishing secret that changed him and everyone around him forever. The urgent, almost hysterical ring of Marcus Thorne's private line sliced through the calculated calm of his 40th floor office. He frowned, the deep lines etched around his mouth tightening. Only a handful of people had this number. He was in the middle of dissecting a multi-billion-dollar acquisition prospectus, a document that held the careers of thousands in its dense clauses. "Thorne," he answered, his voice clipped impatient. It wasn't his lead counsel, nor was it the CEO of Thorne and Associates. It was Peterson, the foreman, from the Donovan construction site, a sprawling downtown redevelopment project his firm was handling. The labyrinthine legalities for Peterson's voice was strained, uncharacteristically high-pitched. "Mr. Thorne, sir, you need to come down here right now. It's not a legal thing exactly, but you just gotta see this." Marcus's frown deepened into a scowl. "Peterson, I am in the middle of something critical. If it's not a legal matter, delegate it. That's what you're paid for, sir. With all due respect, I can't." "No one else. They won't. Please, Mr. Thorne, it's urgent." The man sounded genuinely distressed, almost frightened, which was unusual for the hardened construction veteran. A sigh of exasperation. Marcus Thorne did not do non-critical site visits. His time was billed at a rate that made potentates blink. But Peterson's uncharacteristic panic and the fact that the Donovan project was a flagship account made him reluctantly agree. 5 minutes, Peterson. Then I'm gone. He arrived at the noisy, dust-choked site in his immaculate Italian suit, his driver navigating the Bentley through a gauntlet of heavy machinery. Peterson, a burly man caked in grime, met him, his hard hat askew, his face pale beneath the dirt. He didn't offer explanations, just gestured mutely towards a pile of discarded rebar and broken concrete near the foundation of a half-erected skyscraper. A small group of workers stood awkwardly nearby, silent, their expressions a mixture of pity and apprehension as they glanced at Marcus. He strode forward, his expensive leather shoes crunching on grit. And then he saw it. Curled in a pathetic heap, barely distinguishable from the rust and debris, was a tiny orange kitten. It was mangled, one leg twisted at an unnatural angle, its fur matted with blood and grime. A faint, almost imperceptible tremor ran through its tiny body. It was, by all appearances, moments from death. Marcus Thorne, a man known for his icy composure and ruthless pragmatism, a man who hadn't shown overt emotion even at his own wife's funeral, a year prior, stopped dead. The cacophony of the construction site seemed to fade. He stared at the dying creature, his face an unreadable mask. Then he moved, not with disgust, not with indifference, but with a sudden shocking intensity. "Get me a clean box." He snapped, his voice a low command that brooked no argument, something soft. Now he turned to his bewildered driver. "Call Dr. Armitage. Tell him I'm on my way, emergency." Before anyone could fully process the scene, the titan of corporate law, Marcus Thorne, kneeling in the dirt, he had gently, almost reverently scooped up the broken kitten. Cradling the near lifeless creature against the fine wool of his suit, He strode back towards his car, leaving a trail of stunned, open-mouthed construction workers in his wake. The urgent questions hung heavy in the grimy air. What on earth had just happened to Marcus Thorne? Marcus Thorne was a man sculpted by ambition and tempered by loss. In his early 50s, he stood at the apex of the legal world, a name synonymous with high-stakes corporate litigation and unyielding negotiation. His firm, Thorne and Associates, occupied prime real estate in one of Chicago's newest skyscrapers, a testament to his drive and brilliance. He was known for his razor-sharp intellect, his encyclopedic knowledge of contract law, and an almost unnerving ability to remain emotionally detached, dissecting opponents with surgical precision. His suits were bespoke, his watch worth more than most people's annual salaries, and his penthouse apartment a minimalist expanse of glass, steel, and unsettling silence. A year ago, that silence had become heavier, more profound. Emily, his wife of 25 years, had succumbed to a relentless illness that had slowly stolen her from him. Their marriage had been complicated. In the early years, there was warmth, shared dreams, laughter. But as Marcus's career soared, a subtle distance had grown. He'd poured himself into his work, finding a sense of control and accomplishment there that eluded him in the hushed, sterile rooms of Emily's illness. Her death left a void, one he attempted to fill with even longer hours, more complex cases, a relentless pursuit of professional dominance. Grief for Marcus was a private, unacknowledged malignancy. His colleagues saw only a man more driven, more focused, perhaps a touch colder than before. His driver, James, a stoic man who had been with Marcus for over a decade and had witnessed his silent unraveling after Emily's passing, handled the Bentley with practiced smoothness, glancing with thinly veiled astonishment at the bundle his employer held so carefully. Dr. Alastair Armitage was the city's premier veterinary surgeon, a specialist whose fees were as legendary as his skill, usually reserved for the pampered pets of the city's elite. Marcus had never owned a pet in his adult life. The inciting incident had been visceral, illogical. Standing over that broken kitten, something had fractured within Marcus. A raw, unbidden surge of something not pity, not in the conventional sense. It was more akin to a primal command, an imperative that bypassed his formidable intellect and struck at a core he thought long dead. He hadn't decided to save the kitten. The decision had, in a way, claimed him. At Armitage Veterinary Specialists, a clinic that looked more like a luxury spa, Marcus, still in his dust-streaked suit, laid the tiny creature on the gleaming steel examination table. Dr. Armitage, a silver-haired man with kind eyes and an air of quiet authority, listened intently as Marcus, in clipped, precise tones, recounted the discovery. The vet's initial examination was grim. Multiple fractures, internal injuries, severe dehydration and shock. The kitten, a male, couldn't have been more than 4 or 5 weeks old. Mr. Thorne, Dr. Armitage began gently, the prognosis is exceptionally poor. Euthanasia would be the most humane? No, the word was flat absolute. You will do everything possible. Cost is not a factor. Dr. Armitage looked at the powerful lawyer, a man he'd met socially a few times at city galas, always aloof, always controlled. He saw something in Marcus's eyes now, a flicker of desperation, a raw intensity that was almost frightening. It will be a very difficult road, Mr. Thorne, if he even survives the initial stabilization, the pain. Manage the pain, Save him. Marcus's voice was low, but the command was unmistakable, and so began the vigil. Marcus Thorne, a man who orchestrated billion-dollar deals, found himself sitting for hours in a private waiting room, staring at a monitor, displaying the fragile heartbeat of an anonymous orange kitten, the reasons for his own shocking actions, a mystery even to himself. He only knew that he couldn't let that tiny spark of life extinguish. Not this one, not now. The first 24 hours were a blur of hushed consultations, emergency surgeries, and the constant rhythmic beeping of machines that seemed to mock the fragility of the life they sustained. Dr. Armitage and his team worked tirelessly, stabilizing the kitten, whom Marcus, in a moment of uncharacteristic impulse, when a nurse asked for a name for the chart, had called Rusty. The name had surfaced from some forgotten recess of his mind, tasting strangely familiar on his tongue. Rusty's condition remained critical. He had a shattered femur, 3 broken ribs, a punctured lung, and severe internal bruising. The first surgery to repair the lung and stop internal bleeding lasted 5 hours. Marcus waited, refusing to leave, fueled by black coffee and an unfamiliar gnawing anxiety. He canceled his entire day's schedule, a board meeting, a deposition, a strategy session for the impending Donovan Corp merger negotiation. His senior partner, Arthur Davies, called his voice a mixture of concern and consternation. "Marcus, what on earth is going on? People are saying you walked off a construction site with a stray cat. Are you all right? I'm handling a personal matter." "Arthur." Marcus replied, his tone leaving no room for discussion. "Reschedule delegate. I'll be in touch." The abruptness only fueled the rumors that Marcus Thorne was finally cracking under the twin pressures of grief and overwork. The practicalities of Rusty's care were a bewildering new landscape for Marcus. When, after 3 days, Dr. Armitage cautiously suggested Rusty might be stable enough for short periods away from the clinic's intensive care unit if he had round-the-clock monitoring, Marcus made another shocking decision. He had a sterile, climate-controlled environment, complete with medical-grade air filtration and monitoring equipment, set up in a spare bedroom of his penthouse. He hired a private veterinary nurse for the shifts when he absolutely had to be at his office, but insisted on personally overseeing the nighttime care. His minimalist apartment, once a monument to uncluttered order, was now strewn with tiny feeding syringes, heating pads, soft blankets, and the faint antiseptic smell of a hospital. Marcus, a man who hadn't prepared his own coffee in years, found himself meticulously warming kitten formula, gently cleaning Rusty's frail body, and learning to administer subcutaneous fluids. He was clumsy at first, his large hands fumbling with the delicate tasks, but a fierce determination drove him. He read veterinary journals online, absorbing complex medical terminology with the same intensity he applied to legal briefs. Complications mounted. Rusty developed an infection, his tiny body racked with fever. Another emergency trip to Dr. Armitage, another battery of expensive treatments. The bills were astronomical, but Marcus paid them without a second glance, drawing from his personal accounts, an act that would have been unthinkable for any other expenditure not related to his business or Emily's previous care. His sister, Caroline, his only living relative, flew in from California, alarmed by the increasingly bizarre reports from Arthur Davies. She found Marcus gaunt, exhausted, but fiercely protective of the tiny creature in the makeshift ICU. "Marcus, what is this?" She'd asked, her voice laced with genuine worry. A cat. You need to rest. You need to grieve Emily properly. Not do this. People are saying you're having a breakdown. I'm fine, Caroline. He'd stated, his voice flat, offering no further explanation. The familiar wall between them, a structure built over years of his emotional unavailability, remained firmly in place. Her visit was brief, ending with her tearful plea for him to seek therapy. The Donovan Corp merger, a deal he'd been meticulously constructing for months, was a significant complication. The lead negotiator for the opposing side, a notoriously aggressive lawyer named Julian Caldwell, sensed weakness. Hearing whispers of Thorne's erratic behavior, Caldwell began to push harder, demanding concessions, attempting to exploit Marcus's perceived instability. Arthur Davies warned Marcus that the clients were getting nervous. Through it all, Rusty clung to life. There were small victories that resonated disproportionately within Marcus. The first time Rusty lapped a little formula from a syringe on his own, the day his breathing seemed a fraction less labored. The faint, almost inaudible purr Marcus thought he felt when he gently stroked the kitten's head. These moments were anchors in a sea of exhaustion and anxiety. One evening, as he sat by Rusty's incubator, the city lights glittering coldly beyond the vast windows of his penthouse, a fleeting image pierced his consciousness. Emily, years younger, her face alight with laughter, cradling a small orange cat against her cheek. The memory was so vivid, so painful, he recoiled as if struck. He squeezed his eyes shut, pushing it down back into the vault where he kept his grief. He wasn't ready. He couldn't face it. Not yet. He focused on the kitten, on the next medication dose, the next temperature check. That at least was tangible, that he could control. Weeks bled into a month. Rusty, against all odds, was slowly, painstakingly beginning to mend. The external fixator on his tiny leg was a marvel of veterinary engineering. His breathing was less shallow, and he'd even started to show glimmers of a kitten's natural curiosity. His one good eye tracking Marcus's movements, the around-the-clock nursing had been scaled back, but Marcus still spent every available moment with him, his life reordered around Rusty's feeding schedule and medication times. The transformation in Marcus was subtle to the outside world. He was perhaps more tired, more preoccupied, but internally a seismic shift was occurring. The turning point arrived with the need for another surgery, this one to remove the pins from Rusty's femur and assess the healing of his internal injuries. It was less critical than the initial life-saving procedures, but still carried significant risks for such a fragile creature. Dr. Armitage, during the pre-surgery consultation, looked at Marcus with a thoughtful expression. "Mr. Thorne," he said, his voice gentle but direct, "you've moved heaven and earth for this kitten. You've spared no expense, dedicated countless hours. Most people, even with beloved family pets, might have drawn a line much sooner. Forgive me for asking, but is there a particular reason for this extraordinary commitment?" The question, though, kindly put hung in the air of the sterile consultation room. Marcus, typically so articulate, so quick, with a retort or a deflection, found himself at a loss for words. He looked away towards the window overlooking the city, the distant skyscrapers, a cold, indifferent audience. The truth, the real truth, was a raw, unexamined wound within him. He had been acting on an instinct so profound it felt almost like an external force but he hadn't dared to dissect its origins. Later that evening, back in the quiet solitude of his penthouse, Marcus sat beside Rusty's warmed bed. The kitten was asleep, its tiny chest rising and falling in a fragile rhythm. The city's hum was a distant thrum. Exhaustion weighed heavily on Marcus, but his mind was uncharacteristically turbulent. Dr. Armitage's question echoed, "Why?" And then the vault door creaked open. Not a fleeting image this time, but a torrent of memories, vivid and complete, washing over him with an intensity that left him breathless. He saw Emily, 23 years old, her eyes sparkling, standing in the doorway of their tiny, sun-drenched first apartment. A tiny, bedraggled orange kitten, no bigger than Rusty, cradled in her hands. "Marcus, look, I've found him by the bins. He's starving. Can we keep him, please?" He remembered his initial reluctance, their tight budget, the cramped space. But Emily's joy, her fierce determination to save that scrap of life, had been infectious. They'd named him Ginger. Ginger had become the vibrant, furry heart of their early life together. He'd slept on their bed, helped Marcus study for the bar exam, by batting at his pens, and filled their small apartment with his loud, cheerful purr. He was their first shared responsibility, a symbol of their nascent love and resilience. In the face of youthful struggles, Ginger had lived for 17 years, a constant, comforting presence through career changes moves and the gradual, unspoken erosion of their early intimacy as Marcus's ambition took hold. The most painful memory surfaced last Emily, frail and weak, in her hospital bed, her voice a mere whisper. She knew her time was short. She knew Marcus, his grief-stricken heart, already encased in layers of professional steel, would retreat further into his work, into an impenetrable fortress of solitude. Marcus, she'd rasped her fingers, surprisingly strong as they gripped his. "Don't let your heart turn to stone. Promise me, if you ever find a life so small, so helpless, like our little Ginger was, promise me you'll open your heart just once more. Save it for me, for us. It will help you remember the simple things, the love." He had promised, his voice choked, not truly understanding the weight of her words, then lost in the fog of anticipatory grief he'd forgotten. Or rather, he'd buried it along with everything else that hurt too much. Now looking at Rusty, the resemblance to that first kitten, the raw vulnerability, the desperate fight for life, it all coalesced. This wasn't just a random act of charity. This was Emily. This was her last gift, her final plea. This was the promise. A sob, dry and ragged, tore from Marcus's chest. It was the first sound of true grief he'd allowed himself in over a year. He wasn't losing his mind. He was finding a piece of his soul he thought had died with Emily. The next morning, he called Dr. Armitage, authorized the surgery. He said, his voice hoarse but clear, "And doctor, thank you for asking." He didn't elaborate, but the vet heard the profound shift in his tone. Marcus Thorne was no longer just acting on a strange compulsion. He was acting on love. He was acting on a promise. The point of no return wasn't just about saving Rusty. It was about saving himself. Rusty survived the surgery, the pin successfully removed from his femur. The road to recovery, however, remained arduous. His leg was weak, his muscles atrophied. He needed painstaking physical therapy, gentle stretches, assisted movements. Several times a day, Marcus, guided by instructional videos Dr. Armitage provided and his own meticulous research, became Rusty's primary therapist. He transformed one end of his spacious living room into a miniature rehabilitation center, complete with soft mats and specially adapted toys designed to encourage movement. The change in Marcus was palpable, though not always understood by those around him. His focus, once solely on legal battles and corporate takeovers, now included the minute details of Rusty's progress. He celebrated milestones that would have seemed insignificant weeks before Rusty taking his first unaided steps. Rusty batting playfully at a dangling string. Rusty finally eating solid food with something resembling appetite. These small victories were fuel news of Marcus Thorne's eccentricity, as it was now widely termed in legal circles, continued to spread. Julian Caldwell, his adversary in the Donovan Corp merger, became more aggressive, openly suggesting to the clients that Thorne was no longer mentally fit to handle such a complex negotiation. The partners at Thorne and Associates were deeply concerned. Arthur Davies, caught between loyalty to his old friend and fiduciary duty to the firm, scheduled an emergency partners meeting to discuss forcing Marcus to take an extended leave of absence. Marcus, however, was no longer the man they thought they knew. The raw, directionless intensity he'd exhibited in the initial days of Rusty's rescue had coalesced into a quiet, centered strength. He was still a formidable lawyer, but the hard, brittle edges were softening, replaced by a weary but resolute calm. He attended the partners' meeting not with his usual combative stance, but with a surprising openness. He didn't reveal the full, deeply personal story of Emily's promise, but he acknowledged his recent preoccupation, assured them of his continued commitment to the firm, and outlined a clear plan for delegating aspects of the merger while he personally handled the critical negotiations. He spoke with a newfound authority that wasn't about dominance, but about a deep internal conviction. Reluctantly, the partners agreed to let him proceed, though skepticism remained high. He also reached out to his sister Carolyn. This time, when she expressed her concern, he didn't shut her down. He invited her to Chicago. When she arrived, she found a brother who was still grieving, still exhausted, but also lighter. He introduced her to Rusty, a tiny recovering scrap of orange fur, who nonetheless purred like a tiny motor when Marcus picked him up. He spoke of Emily, not with the choked silence of before, but with a quiet sadness mixed with a dawning tenderness. He explained simply that caring for Rusty was something he needed to do, something that was in an unexpected way helping him heal Carolyn. Seeing the genuine, if fragile, peace in her brother's eyes as he interacted with the kitten, finally began to understand the wall between them didn't crumble, but a few stones were definitely loosened. The dark night of the soul for Marcus arrived not in a courtroom, but in the quiet of his penthouse late one night. Rusty, who had been making steady progress, suddenly took a turn for the worse. He became lethargic, refused food, and his temperature spiked. A frantic call to Dr. Armitage confirmed a severe post-operative infection, a common but dangerous complication in such compromised patients. Marcus rushed Rusty back to the clinic. The tiny kitten was once again fighting for his life. All the progress, all the hope seemed to evaporate. Marcus was devastated. The thought of losing Rusty now after everything was unbearable. It felt like he would be losing Emily all over again, failing her final wish. He sat by Rusty's oxygenated incubator through the long, dark hours, the rhythmic beep of the monitors, a torturous reminder of Emily's last days in the hospital. He questioned everything, his ability to care for this fragile creature, the wisdom of his promise, the fairness of a world that could be so cruel. Could he endure another loss? Dr. Armitage, grim-faced but compassionate, told him frankly that Rusty's chances were slim, but that the kitten was a fighter and that Marcus's constant, gentle presence seemed to provide a strange comfort, a will to live in the tiny animal. As dawn approached, casting a gray, uncertain light over the city, Marcus looked at the small, struggling form of Rusty. He saw not just a dying kitten, but a reflection of his own battered spirit, his own fight to find meaning after devastating loss. And in that moment, something shifted. It wasn't about enduring loss. It was about choosing to fight for life, for connection. However fragile, he would not let despair win. He authorized every aggressive treatment. Dr. Armitage proposed his voice hoarse but firm. He also knew he couldn't postpone the inevitable professional reckoning any longer. The final critical meeting for the Donovan Corp merger was scheduled for the next day. He was physically and emotionally drained, but a new steely resolve had taken root. He would fight for Rusty, and he would fight for his professional integrity. Not with his old ruthlessness, but with the quiet strength he was slowly, painfully discovering within himself. He called Arthur Davies. "Tell everyone the meeting is on. I'll be there." The atmosphere in the Thorne and Associates main conference room was thick with tension. The clients from Donovan Corp looked apprehensive, their gazes flickering between Arthur Davies's strained face and the empty chair at the head of the table. Julian Caldwell, representing the opposing side, smirked, radiating an almost predatory confidence. He'd spent the last few weeks poisoning the well, subtly suggesting Thorne's instability. Today, he expected to dismantle Thorne and Associates' position with ease. The door opened and Marcus Thorne walked in. He was impeccably dressed as always, his suit tailored to perfection, his shoes gleaming. But there was a profound weariness in his eyes, a new gravitas that silenced the room. He looked like a man who had journeyed through a personal hell and returned changed but unbroken. He took his seat, nodded curtly to the clients, and then, to everyone's surprise, addressed the entire room before the official negotiations began. "Ladies and gentlemen," his voice was quiet, but it commanded attention. "Before we commence, I wish to address the speculation regarding my recent conduct." Caldwell leaned forward, a gleam in his eye. Marcus's partners held their breath. "I have been attending to a deeply personal and pressing matter, an obligation I could not and would not neglect." He paused, his gaze sweeping the room, meeting Caldwell's stare without flinching. "It required a significant portion of my attention. However, my commitment to my clients and to this firm remains absolute. My focus, when given, is total." He didn't offer details, no explanations of kittens or late wives. He simply stated his truth with a quiet dignity that was more powerful than any bluster. Then he turned to the business at hand with a clarity and precision that stunned everyone, especially Caldwell. Marcus began to dissect the complexities of the merger. The weeks of tending to Rusty, the meticulous attention to detail, the problem-solving had, in an unexpected way, sharpened his already formidable intellect. He countered Caldwell's aggressive tactics not with his old fire, but with an unshakable, almost serene logic. He presented innovative solutions to long-standing impasses, his arguments cogent, his command of the facts absolute. He wasn't just a brilliant lawyer, he was a wise one. By lunchtime, it was clear Marcus Thorne had not only salvaged the deal, but had secured terms more favorable than anyone had thought possible. Caldwell was left speechless, his smugness replaced by grudging respect. As the clients from Donovan Corp were enthusiastically shaking his hand, Marcus's personal phone clutched in his hand. Beneath the table vibrated a text message from Dr. Armitage. He discreetly glanced at it. 3 words. He's turned around. A slow breath escaped Marcus's lips. A profound, bone-deep relief washed over him so potent he momentarily closed his eyes. Rusty was going to make it. He had kept his promise. The aftermath of the Donovan Corp merger meeting was transformative. Marcus Thorne, once viewed as a cold, ruthless legal machine, was now seen in a new light. His partners, who had been on the verge of ousting him, now looked at him with a mixture of awe and newfound respect. They didn't understand the full story, but they understood that Marcus had faced a profound personal challenge and had emerged stronger, more centered. Julian Caldwell, in a rare moment of professional courtesy, later admitted to Arthur Davies that he'd never seen a more masterful negotiation. Marcus brought Rusty home from the clinic a week later. The tiny orange kitten, still bearing the marks of his ordeal, a slight limp, a network of faint scars beneath his new fur, was nonetheless a vibrant spark of life. Marcus's sterile penthouse, once a symbol of his isolation, began to feel like a home. A plush cat bed occupied a sunny spot in the living room. Tiny toys were scattered on the expensive rugs, and the rhythmic sound of a contented purr often filled the silence. He reconnected with his sister Caroline, their conversations no longer strained by unspoken grief, but filled with a tentative, rediscovered affection. He even established a small anonymous foundation in Emily's name, dedicated to funding emergency medical care for animals rescued from abusive situations. A quiet tribute to her compassion and the kitten who had inadvertently saved him. Marcus Thorne didn't transform into a completely different man. He remained a brilliant lawyer, a leader in his field. But the unyielding hardness was gone, replaced by a quiet empathy, a deeper understanding of the fragility and preciousness of life. He still worked long hours, but he now made time for other things. Quiet evenings with Rusty curled on his lap as he read, weekend visits with Caroline, even an occasional solitary walk in the park. Noticing the simple beauty Emily had always tried to show him. His actions in finding and saving that dying kitten in the field had indeed shocked everyone but the truth behind them. A testament to enduring love, a kept promise, and the unexpected pathways to healing, was a quiet revelation that resonated far beyond the confines of his own life. Marcus Thorne had not just saved a cat. He had, in the most profound way, saved himself. And in doing so, he finally understood the last precious gift his wife had given him, a reason to open his heart again.